Good afternoon. Here we are again. It is noon, September 30th, Saturday. And here in the eastern part of the United States, it is noon. And welcome. So glad to have you here today. And just want to say, this has been really fun. I've been very excited using this format, this Zoom webinar for what used to be my weekly radio program for many years with WKBK here in Keene. And then also what used to, then I tried that Blog Talk Radio, and that didn't really work out well. A lot of technical things there, but this has worked out really well because I can have people here. Some of you are right now with me live. And then having then started our YouTube channel a couple of weeks ago, put these on YouTube. They're super easy to get back to whenever you want, and share with other people if you want to as well. And people can also find me who don't get my newsletter and don't know about the Zoom webinar. So this has just been really, really fun. I am logging in on my other laptop here to make sure I can open up my newsletter for today, but I'll introduce myself in the meantime. My name is Rebecca Becky Montrone. I have a business here in Keene called Wondrous Roots. I am a certified holistic health practitioner with a degree in holistic nutrition, and I am certified through the American Association of Drugless Practitioners. We started this company, I incorporated in 2005. So we are getting close to like 20 years. We're getting on there. So very glad to have you all. My phone is ringing, but it will stop in 2 rings. And apologize for that. It's probably spam being Saturday at this time of the morning, but in any case, our number here, we are located on the up on the 3rd floor of the Miller Forge building. And we are open 9:30 to 5, Monday through Friday. Those are our open door hours. On the 3rd floor, we have handicap access, we have elevator, we have a really good stairwell for those who want to use it as part of a way to stay in shape. It's quite challenging. And then, but our door is right open there, 9:30 to 5. You can just come in. We have a shop out front, and you're welcome to come in, introduce yourself, say hi, see what we're all about. So I meet with clients in private consultation, and also make things. So come up with different herbal things that we want to do. My schooling, my education, my passion has been all over the place with regard to clinical work, helping people with various health problems, and then finding out innovative ways to help with those problems, to really to do all I can to promote and support all of health, because when health problems arise, they come from a system that our systems are broken because we're mortal. And there are certain things we can do to reinforce them, to shore them up, and to help us get the best health we possibly can, regardless of our genetics or whatever that might be, our circumstances, our past nutrition or circumstances. There's always up to go. And so I love working with people in private consultation. And those of you, many of you are listening, have done that and do that. And it's really, I consider Wondrous Roots a family more than a business. And so very grateful for all of you and for that. Our number here is 603-439-2603. And you are welcome to call to reach me during those business hours and leave me a message if we are not available. You can also reach out to me on my website, wondrousroots.org, and leave that in the contact area, and that will come to my private email, and I'm the only person who sees those emails. Okay, I think I covered that. Next week, it's very interesting. This is another advantage. Excuse me, I'm just going to hang my phone up. Okay, that didn't work. Remind me next time. Somebody just remind me to put my phone in the other room. Okay. So that said, next week I will be traveling. So what I will do instead is I will pre-record this session. I'll just be alone. I won't have any of you here with me, but I'll pre-record it just like normal. And then I'll put it in the link in the newsletter that I send out next Saturday, and you'll just be able to carry on. Next week, I'm going to be talking about, what am I talking about? Next week, I'm talking about prebiotics, probiotics, and sac boo. So you're probably wondering what sac boo is. So you're going to have to, if you don't know, you're going to have to tune in to next week's and see what that's all about. But there's a lot of confusion about that, isn't there? What's a prebiotic? People ask me, I take probiotics. Why do I need a prebiotic? What's the difference? So that's what I'll be talking about next week. So tune in for that. Once you get the newsletter, you'll be able to tune in at your convenience. So today, talking about another confusing topic, health topic, and another one that oftentimes people ask me about, and that is foods that are high in lectins or high in oxalates or the nightshade vegetables. And are these bad for us? There's a very popular Dr. Gundry, who's very popular in the holistic world, nutrition, etc., online, and Stephen Gundry, and I agree with a lot of things he says, but he is like death on lectins. And lectins, the thing is, these things, the oxalates, the lectins, and the fact that certain foods are in the nightshade family are all healthy foods in other respects. They're very vital. They're very excellent in nutrient content and fiber and many other things. And they're not foods we want to all avoid. Just, okay. I mean, what eventually do you end up going to? The carnivore diet, I guess, eat meat, drink water. And I love meat, and I'm totally not in line with meatless diets, those kinds of things. But but the meatless things, I think meat, if you followed me before, I really embrace the Weston A. Price model of nutrition, which is whole foods and the gamut of them, healthy fats, meats, fish, eggs, dairy, all of that. And we don't want to live a really limited life. And we don't want to have to just say, oh, for my health, I have to eliminate these foods. Now, some of us will have to eliminate some foods based on our individuality and sensitivities, of course. But what is the general outlook? And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. And I hope if you are interested in learning, if you want to ask a question, or if you want to talk with me, you can look at the bottom of your screen, raise your hand. You can open the chat and talk to us there. Talk to me. You can choose who you want to talk to, or talk to everyone by typing. The Q&A is also there, and you can type in your questions or comments or whatever, and I will get to them. So it makes it very, very convenient. And thanks for being with me. I appreciate it. So I say here, lectins, oxalates, nightshades, bad? Oh. Don't you find it discouraging? I do. You're eating something healthy and you're like, oh, now I got to worry about this. So many healthy foods, but all we hear lately is how we need to avoid them. The lectin-free diet, the low oxalate diet, the anti-inflammatory diet. I say, I want to have my beans, barley, tomatoes, peppers, nuts, eggplant, onions, and eat them too. Today, let's tiptoe through the bean fields in an attempt to sort fact from fiction. Let's discover strategies to help us save the baby and throw out the bathwater, save the nutrients, get rid of the problems. And there's some cool ways we can do that. So I am going to continue on. So lectins. So lectins are a type of protein found in certain types of plants. There are thousands of kinds of lectins, and some of them are now blamed for digestive problems, obesity, brain fog, and a slew of autoimmune diseases. But many of the plants that contain lectins could be among the healthiest foods in the modern diet. So what's the truth? Should you eat them or not? And I know this is ringing a bell. with many of you because you ask me about it. I get asked these questions all the time. What do you think? Or what should I do? Do I need to follow with this or that? And so I'm going to go to this resource. And again, if you get my newsletter, and if you're on the Zoom, you obviously do get the newsletter. The Truth About Lectins, this comes from Food Revolution Network, written by Ocean Robbins, who is the CEO of the Food Revolution Network. I liked these articles that I chose for today's program because they are balanced. They tell you what the problems are, but they also bring out some of the other really wonderful things about these foods. In case you were, okay, lectins are defined as proteins that bind to carbohydrates. They're all over the place in nature, in plants, animals, and all kinds of microorganisms. There are thousands of kinds of lectins. And while they don't have any nutritional value themselves, they are found in foods that have other nutritional benefits. According to one chapter that doesn't exactly qualify as light reading, the word lectin comes from the Latin legere. I don't know, legere. I don't know. I don't speak Latin. To select. They select the carbohydrates to which they bind. To oversimplify with a metaphor, lectins are like the bumps and holes in Lego blocks, which probably are completely unrelated to the Latin word legere, but it would be nice if they were. Where are they found? They're found in a wide variety of both animal and plant foods. About 30% of the food we eat on a daily basis contains lectins. So just think about that. And that's where I'm coming from here today. Like if 30% of the foods we normally eat contain lectins, and now we have to avoid lectins, what does that do to our diet? It changes it by a huge percentage. Beans, peanuts, lentils, tomatoes, potatoes. Tomatoes and potatoes are also in the nightshade family. Peas, soy, barley, eggplant, fruits, wheat, rice. Looking over the list, we can see a few categories of lectin-rich foods, legumes, nuts, grains, fruits, and nightshade vegetables. While the amount of lectins in individual foods can vary greatly. Generally, these types of food will contain high lectin levels. Well, that's a lot of foods that we eat, at least that I eat. Controversy and myths over lectins. Are lectins bad for you? Some researchers think lectins evolved to have an evolutionary purpose, namely so that plants can protect themselves against pests and pathogens. And I would say that I disagree with the evolutionary process there. I would say our creator is really smart. And he did create plants with characteristics to protect themselves, like tomatoes are so high in antioxidants because they need that to protect themselves from the sun. And different properties of plants will protect them from certain insects and infestation, allow them to survive and thrive. And when we eat those things, it can impart to us some of those abilities to withstand things that come our way. And that's how, eating like foods high in antioxidants help us squelch inflammatory processes brought on by oxidative stress or reactive oxygen species. And that's what we're all hit with all the time. So I would say that plants are very aptly created by a very intelligent creator. This protective effect is similar to other phytochemicals such as flavonoids, which serve as natural defenses in plants and are extremely beneficial nutrients in our diet. The primary reason there is controversy over eating lectins today is because of the best-selling book, The Plant Paradox, written by Stephen Gundry, whom I mentioned before. And this wasn't the first time, I've been hit with this and known about Stephen Gundry and all of this plant paradox since he came out with this. And he released this book in 2017 and advocates a lectin-free diet. Now, number one, don't you just sort of cringe when you see a diet that avoids completely something other than, processed food, processed sugary stuff, junk, that completely takes a food group and says, just completely avoid this. Number one, it doesn't seem to make much sense because common sense would tell you variety is a good thing. And it doesn't seem very sustainable for the long term. Oh, wow, I'm gonna not do this for a while. I'm not gonna eat this for a while. That's fine. Maybe you want to take a break for something just to, or do a detox or some sort of something for a temporary time. But say somebody who goes on a low carbohydrate diet and eats no, bread, no pasta, no anything like that. That's usually sustainable for a time. Very few people want to live that way for the rest of their lives. So I kind of get a little suspicious when I see programs that advocate eliminating an entire whole class of foods or types of foods. So that's what the plant paradox is all about. Stephen Gundry, the author, claims that lectins adversely impact your gut flora, the bacteria that live in your digestive system, which can lead to a whole slew of unwanted effects. He claims that many people suffer from lectin intolerance or sensitivity, symptoms of which can include gas, bloating, nausea, diarrhea, fatigue, aching joints, and even allergic reactions after eating them. The plant paradox goes so far to say that lectins are the biggest dietary danger to our health and may even be killing us. Gundry warns that eating beans, nuts, and many fruits and vegetables, Dr. Gundry warns against eating beans, nuts, and many fruits and vegetables, urging us to remove lectins from our diets. What benefits purportedly come from eating a lectin-free diet? The main claims include improved digestion, more energy, less gas and bloating after eating, better mood and brain power, and even improved weight control. Those are some pretty bold promises. So what's this author says of this article? So what's the deal? Are these claims backed up by research? Do we have studies demonstrating that these purported lectin-free diet benefits are real? In a word, no. In a louder word, no. In caps and in caps, all N-O, in caps. Lectin-containing foods are not the enemy. While we're all entitled to our own opinions, we're not entitled to creating our own facts. The plant paradox claims about lectins are not backed by science. The foods that Dr. Gundry is telling us to avoid are, for the most part, beneficial. It's true that plant lectins bind to carbohydrates, which slows down their digestion. But in many cases, this is a good thing. It lowers the glycemic index of carbohydrates, and it contributes to the weight loss and anti-diabetes effects of beans and many other plant foods. Dr. Gundry is telling people to be afraid of eating foods like beans and many fruits and vegetables. But the plant foods that he says to avoid are, in fact, among the healthiest foods we can eat. The more we eat them, the lower our risk for heart disease, cancer, type 2 diabetes, and Alzheimer's. And in that article, when you pull it up from your newsletter, you can see there are hyperlinks to those backing up what he's talking about there. Beans, for example, are rich in many anti-cancer phytochemicals, which is why they consistently show very powerful associations with lower rates of breast cancer. There's a type of lectin found in mushrooms that's been found to inhibit the growth of cancer cells. Goodness, mushrooms. This is one of the reasons that mushrooms are another food offering powerful protection against cancer. Tomatoes are high in lectins, but are also high in lycopene, which has shown extraordinary anti-cancer effects. So this is, again, what we're looking at is, do we want to throw out the baby and the bathwater? Do we want to just heave this everything out and just say, well, at least I'm not getting the bad from the lectins? And I would argue, if bad from the lectins is bad for everyone, I wouldn't say so. I eat lots of lectins and I don't have any of those problems talked about there, such as bloating, gas, poor digestion. What did he say? I don't have gas, bloating, nausea, diarrhea, fatigue, aching joints, and even allergic reactions. I don't have those things. I have some aching joints, but it's not because of lectins. Well, how do you know, Becky? Well, I just know. Okay, I know. Okay, so lectins that are found in soybeans, which you know I don't like soybeans, but not because of the lectins. Bananas, buckwheat, mushrooms, and many other plant foods have been found to have such strong anti-cancer effects that some of these lectins are being investigated as potential cancer therapies. And when I say I don't like soybeans, I don't like modern soy. I don't like modern soy that's unfermented on a regular eat it every day basis. Why? Because it's goitrogenic, which means it has a phytate that stops uptake of iodine to the thyroid. And we're already in a very iodine deficient environment when it comes to our food and our nutrition if we're not supplementing. And so, and modern soy, so that's modern soy, so that's unfermented. So soy foods that can be helpful and can be eaten without a problem are fermented soy, such as miso and tempeh, but you must be careful to always check on this particular plant, especially for non-GMO status, because soybeans are one of the most heavily pesticided with glyphosate crops in this country. And so very careful on soy, but I had to digress on that because I don't want to be misleading on this. Okay. Bananas, buckwheat, blah, 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 blah. He says, given all the overwhelming evidence in favor of common lectin containing foods, what evidence does Gundry marshal to support his claim that lectins are the devil's proteins? The devil's proteins. Essentially, it's a flimsy case of guilt by association. Gundry and I like this writer, he's very clever. Gundry and his fellow lectophobes, I'm pretty sure I just made that word up. I like to point out that one of the lectins found is in castor beans, a compound called ricin, is one of the deadliest poisons ever discovered. Yes. Do you know about that? The castor beans? The castor beans, if people were fed castor beans, they died of laughter. Have you heard of that? Dying of laughter? Well, there actually is this ricin in castor beans that causes that horrible grimacing, laughing death. It was when I was on a compounding panel with my father and several other compound pharmacists. We were working, we called it the Manchester Group, and we were working on products that we could use that were natural, that had a certain effect. And my role on the panel was to find things in the natural world that could be used instead of the things in the pharmaceutical world they were using to get things to market faster, to get things out, and to eliminate some of those problems with the drugs. And I can't remember what drug it was. I don't know. I think it might have been physostigmine. No, it wasn't that, because I use I use prickly ash bark for that. It was one of them, and castor bean was the source of that. It was like, no way can we use that. We absolutely cannot use castor bean. So I have a little funny memory of castor bean stuff in my mind. So anyway, one of the deadliest poisons ever discovered. Apparently, Russian hitmen like to inject it into the bloodstreams of their victims, sometimes with special spring-loaded umbrella guns. Oh my gosh. The assassin gets away and the recipient of the injection dies within 48 hours of laughter, but not because they're feeling jolly. Certain lectins can pose more side effects than others. Raw kidney beans, for example, contain a lectin called phytohemagglutinin, which causes unpleasant symptoms when eaten. Eating just 4 or 5 raw beans can trigger symptoms, and in high doses, phytohemagglutinin can actually be toxic. And actually, eating too many actual kidney beans can be a problem, even if they're cooked. I stumbled on that. I'll have to get back into that, but kidney beans in particular. So lectins are beneficial in small amounts. You might be thinking, golly, I certainly don't want that stuff in my body. I'm going to avoid lectins from now on. After all, if the evolutionary purpose of lectins is to create plant poisons to prevent them from predation, why would you want to poison yourself? The answer becomes clear when we look at the other phytonutrients, compounds in plants that are really good for us and often indispensable to our health, right? We need them, it's not just a nice little add-on. It's actually the mild stress of a tiny amount of poison that triggers healing responses in our bodies. Again, all things in moderation and balance, right? Yeah, so that's the other thing. When you go on these diets that are all like eliminate this, that, and the other thing. You're all on one thing. And then what's the problem with having that out of balance with the other things? Seems to make perfect sense to me. Kind of like the stress of lifting heavy weights that makes our muscle fibers respond by breaking down and then growing stronger. The fancy name for good stress that forces us to grow stronger is hormesis. Without experiencing regular doses of hormesis, small, manageable challenges, we become fragile to our environments and do not thrive. I would certainly digress, excuse me, and comment that's true in our lives too. People say, oh, there's so much stress. There's stress. Well, you need some stress or you're just going to be a wimp throughout all your life, right? So you got to have stress. You got to have things that don't go right. You have to have things that cause you to, find solutions and get stronger, get better. That's part of growing your character. That's part of growing and maturing as a person. So we don't want everything to be no stress, no gain, same thing. I think exercise is the perfect model for that. The perfect analogy or perfect comparison is that's how you build your muscle, by creating stressful resistance. Okay, so little sermon there. While experiencing regular doses of hormesis, small manageable challenges, we become fragile to our environment without. We become fragile to our environments and do not thrive. The key words here are small and manageable, and that we can say across the board as well. If you look up hormesis in a scientific textbook, you'll see a bunch of graphs shaped like the letters U or J that illustrate the dose response nature of the phenomenon. That is, a small amount of some toxins are actually good for you, while a larger dose is not. And a large enough dose, like that contained in killer KGB umbrellas, the castor bean, will kill you. And that's the simple solution to Dr. Gundry's so-called plant paradox. The difference between a massage and a beating, or between a cool glass of water and drowning. Lectins, like other phytonutrients, are harmful in large doses and generally beneficial or neutral in small ones. And so we might ask, how might it be that somebody gets too much of something and out of balance? And I would, again, point to something like maybe a diet that excludes, like a vegetarian diet. And I know that probably isn't going to sound popular with some people for me to say that, but the vegetarian diet is very limited. It removes several nutritious foods, a pure vegetarian diet. So one that relies all on things like beans and rice, soy. Can be out of balance, and then we're having things more in quantity than we should. For instance, I'm trying to think. I made that in my newsletter. I have a recipe there, 3 recipes this time, and one of them is for spinach garlic lentils, and I made them last Sunday evening, and they're delicious. And we've had them as leftovers, but other than that, I wasn't eating beans all day long every day. So they're part of diet, right? But you eat something else the next day. You eat, and so it's you're not eating these day in, day out. And oftentimes a lot of these things are parts of dishes, recipes with other things in them, like tomatoes. When you rarely sit down and just eat a big plate of tomatoes, or eggplant, or onions, or garlic. That just makes sense. Cool glass. Lectins, like other phytonutrients, are harmful in large doses, generally beneficial or neutral in small ones. So reducing lectins in foods. Now you might be worried about your daily dose of lectins. How can you be sure you're not getting too much and drifting into KJB umbrella territory through your irresponsibly enthusiastic consumption of lentils, eggplant, and barley? Luckily, it turns out that most lectins are completely neutralized by cooking. And this is the thing. Okay, so who eats raw rice? Who eats raw barley? Believe it or not, I did when I was young. I'd come home from school And I'd get a little shot glass and fill it with raw barley and go in and sit down. And whatever I was doing, I would just keep dipping my finger into the raw barley and eating it. So there are some nuts out there who do eat raw barley, or did eat raw barley. I haven't eaten raw barley since I was a kid. Yes, eating a bunch of raw kidney beans will give you a miserable case of vomiting and diarrhea, but why on earth would you be eating raw or seriously undercooked kidney beans? The uncooked bean argument favored by lectophobes is a straw man. Cook the beans and the lectins are rendered utterly harmless to most people. Even the greatest lectophobe of them all, Dr. Stephen Gundry, concedes that when beans are pressure cooked, as all canned beans are, like when you buy the beans in a can, they're pretty safe. All right, so right there. And you can pressure cook them yourself. But if you soak them overnight and then you cook them, that does the same thing. What's very wrong with this picture, given the complete lack of evidence for Dr. Gundry's argument and the fact that the plant paradox is adding fuel to our already raging fire of obesity, diabetes, and heart disease by discouraging people from eating some of the most protective foods on the planet, I don't want to portray this as just another vigorous debate among thoughtful scientists. Yes, there are some people who should limit their exposure to lectins, see below, but I think that the vast majority of us should dismiss Dr. Gundry's fiction out of hand. The truth is that steering clear of foods that contain lectins could lead to significant nutritional deficiencies. Gundry clearly knows that the foods he vilifies provide critical nutrients, yet his solution is synthetic pills and powders, which aren't exactly cheap. For example, he promotes a supplement he's invented that he calls a lectin shield, which he claims will neutralize the disastrous effects of those lectins that you absolutely can't avoid. A month's supply costs $79.99 per person, or about $1,000 a year. And there are 10 other supplements that he calls must-haves. I've been a membership in his VIP discount club, advertised for about $10,000 a year. I don't know about you, but to me, that sounds like a lot of money to spend in solving a problem that might not even actually exist. So he says here what the studies actually tell us. Lectins may help treat digestive cancers. So a 2017 report published in the International Journal of Molecular Science examined how plant lectins are currently being used in cancers of the esophagus, stomach, small intestine, colon, liver, and pancreas. Interestingly, some lectins are used to actually detect and diagnose cancer cells. Wow. Others are used for therapeutic purposes because of their anti-tumor activity and ability to trigger cancer cell death. Some lectins are also used to deliver medications for cancer treatment. While other traditional drug delivery methods struggle to pass through physiological barriers like heat, enzymes, and pH in the body, lectins are aggressive in these environments. Research on the best applications for lectins in this area is ongoing. And I would say, yes, let food be thy medicine and medicine thy food. That's really an important principle that, again, created. And when I was talking about evolutionary processes, again, I should just clarify what I mean by that. I do believe that God created within species and plants and things like that the abilities to adapt to their environments, and I guess we could call that evolutionary. So when I said that earlier, I mean evolution as a theory of how things came to be, not as how things adapt to as time changes, as weather things change, as I would say as toxins and pesticides and all of these things kind of happen. The plants have been created with an ability to kind of figure out ways to withstand and make themselves hardy throughout. So anyway, just wanted to do that. Foods containing lectins are packed with disease preventing nutrients. Lectin containing foods like legumes, you know what legumes are, you guys, beans, the beans that you cook. Not green beans, but legumes. Peanuts are one of them as well. Fruits, vegetables, and whole grains are rich sources of B vitamins, healthy fats, protein, fiber, and minerals. Incorporating these foods into your diet provides important nutrients that benefit your overall health and reduces your risk for some of our top killers like heart disease, cancer, type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's. Lectins may help people who are unable to eat for long periods. Although the research is still limited and in the early stages, lectins may be used to promote the growth and integrity of digestive cells, just the very thing that Gundry is warning against, warning people not to eat lectins because of digestion. This could be especially beneficial among people who are at high risk of becoming malnourished due to their inability to eat enough or eat for prolonged periods of time. The lectin phytohemagglutinin has been shown to stimulate the growth of intestinal cells, preventing the weakening of the gut. I mean, that's the huge argument here, has been about the lectins weakening the gut. And then there are a few studies that have been conducted on animals or in vivo that show potential issues with inflammation. For example, a 2017 in vivo study published in the Journal of Immunology examined how lectins may trigger inflammatory pathways. The researchers found that plant lectins may activate something called NLRP3 inflammasome, promoting inflammation in the body that could lead to other diseases. Lectins bind to cells for an extended period of time, which can potentially trigger an autoimmune inflammatory response like rheumatoid arthritis or type 1 diabetes. While this study is intriguing, it is far from conclusive. Despite their potential benefits, there may be people who should avoid lectins, such as the following: people with allergies to lectin-containing foods. So obviously, right? Anybody with a food allergy to anything. And again, a food allergy would be IgE mediated, which means that's an allergy where you have a usually severe reaction, like a peanut allergy or an egg allergy, where you can go anaphylactic, where you can actually die if you have any of this, or sometimes if you're even near it. IgG food allergies are not allergies, they are sensitivities. And so some people can have sensitivities who don't have allergies. And again, if that were to show up, if you had a sensitivity testing done in your list, lectin foods or whatever, some of the foods with lectins, then that would make sense that that would be something that's not for you. People with a digestive sensitivity, such as irritable bowel syndrome or Crohn's disease, and possibly people with autoimmune disorders. As in all things, listen to your own body. You are the only you on the planet. Just because most of the lectin-rich foods are shown in numerous studies to be beneficial to human health doesn't mean they're necessarily right for you. And I like that. Again, it's not a one size fits all. Sometimes that's where these fads, I kind of think of these as fads, come from. They're taking the exception and making it the rule for everyone. And so again, look at your own self as an individual. A small percentage of the population does have a sensitivity to lectins, just as some people must avoid wheat, corn, fruit, and tree nuts. But one person's walnut allergy doesn't mean that another person should refrain from eating walnuts. If you do notice any side effects after eating lectin-rich foods, then you might have a sensitivity to certain lectins or to other compounds in those foods. And you might want to consider reducing or avoiding them or making sure they're adequately cooked. There are some people, for example, who don't do well eating large amounts of raw tomatoes, but they can typically handle abundant pasta sauce and other forms of cooked tomatoes without a problem. That's true. And that comes down to the lectins. Same thing with peppers. Would be in that lectin category. And usually the highest lectin content is in the seeds. And so you can definitely seed tomatoes. People usually always seed the peppers. So anyway, should you eat lectins? Blah, 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 blah. What do you think? I think, we've said enough there. So I'm going to go back to my newsletter and look at my next. I kind of like this 6 natural lectin blockers. But now I have to tell you, I find this on Stephen Gundry's website. And of course, he's advertising his lectin blocker supplement. But some of the things you can do are foods. So natural ones are okra. Okay, so I'm not going to be going for that one. I mean, I like okra. Okay. I liked it fried when my grandmother did it in South Carolina, but I don't really, it's not my favorite thing. But is a polysaccharide powerhouse. So okra is rich in polysaccharides that bind to lectins, blocking their ability to cause harm. So if you like okra, right? So you would have that'd be a typical Southern meal. You'd have beans and rice and okra, I mean, all the time. So think about cultures, think about cuisine and how many ethnic cuisines put foods together. They think they taste good together. They have no idea one is taking care of a potential problem with another. I think that's really cool. With high concentrations of polyphenols and other antioxidants, okra has been shown to have powerful medicinal properties, including protecting against fatigue. And then crustaceans, okay, so get a glut of glucosamine, and that, okay, now something's popping up on my screen. I hate that. Crustacean skins and shells contain glucosamine, a compound that binds to lectins in wheat. Since wheat lectins are known to cause joint problems, this lectin blocker is also a common ingredient in supplements for joint health. And so that comes from shrimp. The shells of shrimp, crabs, lobster, and crawfish contain lots of glucosamine. In fact, glucosamine supplements are often made from them. So there's one that's made from them, and it's called N-acetylglucosamine, NAG. And it's something that I would recommend to somebody who's concerned about the lectins and causing problems. It's a nice lectin binder for that kind of lectin. Bladder wrack, which is basically it's a seaweed. It has been shown to be a potent lectin blocker. The studies also suggest it has antifungal properties against candida, yeast. The benefits of bladder wrack go further with high levels of mucilage, beta carotene, iodine, potassium, zeaxanthin, other compounds. The sea creature is potent. It's been shown to help with digestive issues, weight loss, thyroid conditions, inflammation, and more. And we actually have a bladder wrack extract here that we make, liquid extract. Says bladder wrack grows on the northern Atlantic and Pacific coasts of the US as well as parts of Europe. So next time you're at the beach, bend over and grab some bladder wrack and head to the kitchen. I do not advise that. And I don't even need to say why, right? I mean, that's kind of obvious. But you can buy it, I'm sure. Pig's feet. Okay, gross, but good for you. Oh, that's another thing they eat in the South. Yeah. Glucosamine is also naturally occurring in cartilaginous offal. Offal is a slightly less unappetizing word for organ meats, animal entrails, etc. So next time you make stew, don't forget to toss some pig's feet into the broth or even serve them on their own. They're great not just for blocking lectins, but for your gut in general. Bone broth also has glucosamine. Okay, a lot of people are into the bone broth. So there you go, another thing. Cranberries destroy lectins with D-mannose. Cranberries, oranges, peaches, and blueberries contain D-mannose, a powerful natural compound that binds to lectins, including those in legumes. Research suggests that D-mannose can also protect against infections. This compound also has broad benefits that go beyond blocking lectins. It can help maintain urinary tract and gastrointestinal health. So that's what I recommend for people who are prone to UTI, urinary tract infections. I always recommend using a D-mannose supplement. That's the whole idea behind the cranberry. But you have to eat a lot of cranberries to get concentrated D-mannose. And usually people can't stand cranberry juice without sweetener. So it's a great thing to do, but I didn't realize until several weeks ago its effect on binding with lectins from legumes. So kiwi fruit, that's an easy thing to eat, right? So kiwi fruit increases your body's production of mucin, which helps to form a slippery protective barrier inside your digestive tract. The sialic acid in mucin binds to multiple sources of foods containing lectins, blocking them from permeating the wall of your gut. And this includes lectins found in wheat. So, these are things, if you take a little bit of time and you read this stuff and review it, you can plan meals. If you want to balance, you can plan meals that have something that offsets the other. Like have a salad containing some kiwi fruit along with your your legume dish, your bean dish, maybe your lentil dish with the one that I was talking about, the spinach garlic lentil dish or something like that if you're concerned. And then he talks about his lectin shield, which we already heard about. And there's another good resource there on lectins. So lots of good information here. So oxalates, what about oxalates? It's no secret that foods like spinach, broccoli, sweet potatoes are brimming with health benefits, but did you know that they're also high in oxalates? Oxalates are organic compounds that can accumulate in the kidneys, increasing the risk of painful kidney stones. But while a low oxalate diet was once the go-to treatment for kidney stones, emerging research now shows that you may not need to cut oxalates out of your diet altogether. What I do traditionally is I will recommend to people who are prone to kidney stones a potassium magnesium citrate supplement, because potassium and magnesium citrate form. So to say, well, I take magnesium. Well, no, it has to be the citrate form. And potassium and magnesium together, they stop the oxalates from precipitating out and forming the calcium oxalate stones. So it's kind of a nice way, again, to have your cake and eat it too. Be able to, I want to, I'm prone to this. Oh, for example, had a woman come in maybe last year, and she says, I'm dealing with kidney stones. Now, she's been a client for a long time. She's never had kidney stones. And I said, have you changed your diet, recently? And she said, I said, are you doing green smoothies? Are you doing, things? She goes, how did you know? She goes, yes, I'm doing a lot more of that, smoothies, green smoothies and things. I'm trying to lose some weight. And so there you go. Things like spinach, kale, stuff like that people put in, and they just concentrate it down and drink these green smoothies can really, and it was not 2 weeks later, another woman, a client from a long time, walked in, and she was dealing with the same thing. I asked the same question. Oh yes, how did you know? So you can have your cake and eat it too. You can have your green smoothies all you want, but you should do something to protect yourself. And I would say using a potassium magnesium citrate supplement is also a good idea for the cardiovascular health, because the arterial plaque is, mostly comprised of calcium deposit, and oxalates in the diet can be inflammatory in that area as well. So anyway, oxalates. This one people ask me about, I would say equally along with lectins. Okay, if I can get past all the pop-ups here. Oxalates are referred to as oxalic acid, a natural compound found in a variety of food sources. Some of the most common oxalates in food can be found in plant sources such as fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. The same ones. I mean, they're not all the same exact foods in those classes, but do you see so much overlap here with oxalates and lectins? And again, as we were talking about in the section that we're going over on lectins, many of them are nightshades as well. And these are the so-called inflammatory foods. Oxalates often bind to minerals such as calcium and are excreted out of the body through the stool. However, high amounts of oxalate can build up in the kidneys, leading to the formation of stones, blah, 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 blah. Rather than, it says, a traditional kidney stone diet involves limiting consumption of oxalate foods to prevent these painful mineral deposits from forming. However, many oxalate foods are also rich in other nutrients and often double as fiber-rich, high magnesium foods as well. Again, the thoughtful creator, the smart creator who, okay, if this has this, it now has that to balance it. If this food is high in oxalates, it also has high in magnesium, helping to dissolve that, take care of that problem. Rather than cutting those foods out of your diet altogether, recent research has found that increasing your intake of calcium could be just as effective for the prevention of kidney stones. Now, I would say that that's not, now, I have seen some people say to use calcium citrate to help with that issue. I disagree with that because I think you've heard me speak before. I think most people get plenty of calcium. Calcium goes places it shouldn't when we have too much, like the arteries, like the kidneys. And so I prefer the potassium magnesium approach to that rather than adding calcium. And I will just say there a quick study. Well, I don't know how quick it was to do it, but it's quick to read it. Potassium magnesium citrate is an effective prophylaxis prevention against recurrent calcium oxalate nephrolithiasis, which is kidney stones. And then the conclusion there was potassium magnesium citrate effectively prevents recurrent calcium oxalate stones. And this treatment was given for up to 3 years, reducing risk of recurrence by 85%. So let me say that if you are kidney stone prone, this is the way to go. And you would take this a couple of times a day. A capsule of this a couple of times a day would be my recommendation for that. But let me go back to where I was reading. Risks and side effects. Oxalates are considered an anti-nutrient, which means that they can bind to certain minerals in the body and prevent their absorption. Calcium in particular binds to oxalate and is excreted out of the body, which could be problematic for those consuming a high oxalate, low calcium diet. Again, I just explained my take on that. However, most research generally suggests that enjoying high oxalate foods in moderation as part of a healthy diet is unlikely to cause any adverse effects on health. Additionally, soaking or cooking foods can significantly reduce oxalate levels to maximize nutrient absorption. Kidney stones, he talks about. Minimizing your intake of high oxalate foods from the list below could potentially help prevent kidney stones. However, there's no need to cut these foods from your diet altogether. In fact, recent research suggests that increasing your intake of calcium, again, boosts oxalate excretion. Again, go for the magnesium, potassium. But low oxalate foods, sometimes if you want to maybe balance your higher oxalate foods with lower oxalate foods. Some of those are in the fruit category. Bananas, these are low oxalates. Bananas, cherries, mangoes, grapefruit, melons, grapes, nectarines, papaya. Vegetables, cauliflower, kohlrabi, radishes, chives, mushrooms, cucumbers, cabbage, peas, avocados. Proteins, meat, poultry, seafood, and eggs. Dairy products, milk, cheese, yogurt, butter. Grains, rice, corn bran, rye bread, egg noodles. So we saw rice in the lectin category, but not in the high oxalate category. Beverages, water, herbal tea, wine, herbs and spices, rosemary, oregano. Anyway, drink plenty of water. Cook, soak oxalate foods. Boiling and steaming can help reduce oxalate levels in some foods, including greens and other veggies. So, maybe if you're a big spinach aficionado, you can, stir fry it or do other things with it. Don't always eat it as like a raw salad. Try boiling vegetables for 6 to 10 minutes or steaming them for several minutes until soft. Soaking grains and legumes can also help decrease the oxalate content while also minimizing levels of other anti-nutrients like the phytates, the protease inhibitors, lectins, and tannins. For help with soaking and sprouting foods, check out this handy sprout guide. So you can go to that if you open up that page on my newsletter. Try supplementation. He mentions there the N-acetylglucosamine or a combination of these supplements. And he again talks about calcium citrate to deal with oxalic acid related side effects or pain. I would say use the magnesium potassium citrate and the NAG if you want to do that. And the NAG also helps with the lectins. High oxalate foods. Now, see, this is why, we want to be able to eat these things. So we have to know how to do them. And because the fruits would be blackberries, blueberries, raspberries, kiwis. And kiwis are great for binding with lectins, but they're high in oxalates. So you see how complicated this gets. And I don't think it's meant to be that complicated. Tangerines and figs. Vegetables that are high in oxalates are broccoli, rhubarb, okra. Oh, but we just saw that okra binds with lectins from legumes. So again, I think you really have to, if you are not suffering from some sort of a situation, a condition where things are out of balance, that your gut's been really compromised, then the all things in moderation approach makes sense. It makes sense to me. It is a relief because these are foods we don't want to have to avoid. We want to have them. I mean, who eats spinach all day long besides Popeye? Broccoli, rhubarb, okra, leeks. Leeks are so good for you. Beets, excellent for you. Again, potatoes, eggplant, sweet potatoes, zucchini, carrots, celery, olives, rutabaga, chicory, parsley, peppers. Peppers are also a nightshade. Potatoes, eggplant are nightshades. So, but look at how, what do I want to say? Abundant these foods are in a healthy diet, in a diet where people pay attention to what they're eating. Leafy greens, spinach, escarole, beet greens, kale, collards, Swiss chard, nuts and seeds, almonds, cashews, peanuts, sesame seeds. They're not, that's not a seed, the nut, but anyway. Legumes and soy products, miso, tofu, soy milk, green beans, and kidney beans. Grains, bulgur, corn grits, wheat germ, whole wheat bread, amaranth, buckwheat, and quinoa. Beverages, cocoa, chocolate milk, black tea, instant coffee, dark beers. Some have moderate. So all I'm saying, I think my point here is all things in moderation. Learn those things that you can do to offset. If you really love certain things, you want your green smoothies and you might have a history of kidney stones or something, or you want to make sure that you're covering your bases. There's things you can do. And then the nightshades. So the nightshades, they contain, oh gosh, what is that called? It starts with an S. They are rich sources of nutrients, or are they triggers for inflammatory bowel disease? You've likely heard of nightshade vegetables, whether you think they're good, bad, or something in between. They're a hot topic in the wellness world, and the jury is still out on whether people with food sensitivity should eat them in high concentrations or if they're part of a healthy diet. And while there's not enough scientific evidence to suggest avoiding them altogether, are some nightshades worse than others? And even are nightshade, and what even are nightshade vegetables? So there's a good article there. We're coming up to about 2 minutes before we're going to close. But you're going to read here similar to what we just talked about. This is from a website called NutriSense, written by Brooke McKelvey. And what are the nightshade vegetables? They are bell peppers, tomatoes, chili peppers, eggplant, potatoes, tomatillos, pimentos, goji berries. Onions are in that category too. So didn't really have time to go through all of that, but please check into the information in the newsletter and find out more about that. But again, it kind of comes down to the same sort of, this is what a NutriSense dietitian thinks of their reputation going down. Over the past decade or so, some people have come to believe that eliminating nightshade vegetables will reduce inflammation and improve gut health. However, there is not enough research to substantiate these findings. It was thought to be due to the solanine, there it is, the S word, and alkaloids contained in these foods, which will make you feel crummy in high amounts. And I will say, one time I made an eggplant dip for Christmas for appetizers and stuff. It was so yummy. I ate tons of it. And I did later on during the day feel, but that was like, I ate concentrated tons of eggplant. So anyway, it's about that. Avoiding nightshade vegetables without the presence of signs and symptoms of intolerance may be detrimental to your overall diet quality. Of course, these are really excellent, wonderful foods. Some people may genuinely have food sensitivities to nightshade vegetables like they would with any other food. Additionally, individuals with certain chronic inflammatory processes and autoimmune diseases such as arthritis, IBD, inflammatory bowel disease or psoriasis may see an alleviation of symptoms with a reduction in their consumption of nightshades. But again, I would say a reduction, right? Being careful. Try that first instead of I have to avoid all nightshades. So anyway, that is kind of what I wanted to talk about today, sort of address that those topics of those foods that sometimes are confusing. And am I doing the right thing? Am I eating the right thing? This seems so good for me, but then I read that it's bad for me, or somebody said it's bad for me. So it's really, we're individuals. I think that's the best way to look at it. And then to know how to use them as part of an overall diet that has a lot of variety, a lot of color, a lot of all of the major food groups in different ways. Food is wonderful. It is the main way God set up our world, our earth, to nourish ourselves, and that it tastes, that it's fun to cook, and that food smells good and tastes good and nourishes us at the same time is such a blessing. So I hope you've enjoyed learning about this today. And again, next week, I will be back talking about prebiotics, probiotics, and sac boo. Until then, have a wonderful rest of your day and a great week. And thanks for being with me today, all of you who have joined.